I stood 3 paces behind the podium, where nobody ever looks. That's the trick, stand close enough to hear everything, far enough to be dismissed. In my charcoal suit, deliberately plain, I blended into the background like a shadow that learned how to breathe. The Savannah shipyards were glowing under a dying sun, orange light slicing across cranes and steel. The air smelled like salt, diesel, and the kind of cologne men wear when they want the world to think they're untouchable. In the water, the Sovereign waited. A $4.2 billion monster of engineering. Sterling Maritime's crown jewel. 10,000 tons of arrogance shaped into a ship. On the VIP platform, polished wood, velvet ropes, camera rigs, investors with champagne flutes, sat a red velvet cushion like a throne. Resting on it was the prop for tonight's ceremony. The golden axe. It glowed under the lights, thick and heavy, designed to look like myth. Commissioned by the Sterling family to commemorate the largest private maritime deal in U.S. history. Nobody understood what it really was. Not a trophy. Not a symbol. A trigger. I watched Caleb Sterling, 25, flushed with alcohol and entitlement, smile for the cameras, as if the ship's steel bent to his will. Caleb didn't build Sterling Maritime. He didn't even understand it. But he wore the name like armor and expected the ocean to salute. I leaned toward him, voice low enough that the microphones wouldn't catch. "Mr. Sterling," I said calmly, "the automated ballast sequence is at 98%. If we initiate ignition early, the thermal sensors will trigger a safety lockdown. We need exactly 4 minutes. Please, follow the protocol I outlined this morning." Caleb didn't look at me. "Protocol?" he repeated, sneering like I'd handed him a dirty napkin. He nodded toward the ship. "Elena, look at that hull. My name is on the bow. The ocean doesn't care about your protocols. It cares about who owns the water." A few men chuckled politely. The kind of laughter that says, "We know you're wrong, but we'll laugh anyway because he's rich." I kept my face smooth. "The software is sensitive, Caleb. I've spent 18 months calibrating the AI core. Please just wait for the green light on the console." That's when he turned. His smile collapsed into something sharp. "I'm tired of your reminders," he said, louder now. For the crowd, for the cameras, for his own ego. "You're a glorified translator. You're here so the Japanese investors understand my jokes and the Germans understand my invoices. You don't tell a Sterling when to move." He was close enough that I could smell champagne and arrogance. I didn't step back. I didn't apologize. I didn't flinch. Caleb's eyes flicked to the red velvet cushion. Then he reached down and grabbed the golden axe. Even from where I stood, I saw how heavy it was, made to impress, made to be photographed. The blade was razor sharp, pointless for a ceremony, deadly for a tantrum. Caleb lifted it and smiled wide. The crowd leaned in. Cameras adjusted. He wanted a moment. He wanted power in a picture. "You want a green light?" he called out. "I'll give you a red one." He swung. Not at the ceremonial rope, horizontally, at my face. The blade cut air with a whistle so clean it sounded like the world holding its breath. It sliced a lock of my dark hair and grazed my cheekbone. A collective gasp rippled through the VIP platform. I didn't move. A thin crimson line appeared on my cheek, and a single drop of blood fell onto my white collar like a signature. Caleb laughed, nervous, performing. "Look at that! Precision. Maybe next time you'll learn to keep your mouth shut when the adults are talking." He raised the axe like a trophy and looked to his father. Arthur Sterling stood near the front, silver hair, perfect suit, shark eyes that never stopped calculating. The patriarch. The man who built an empire by turning risk into profit and people into tools. Arthur saw the blood. He saw the investors' faces. He saw the fear. And he did nothing. He smiled. He clapped. The crowd, trained by wealth, clapped too. I took out a white silk handkerchief and pressed it to my cheek. The blood soaked in, blooming into a small red circle. I spoke softly, too soft for the microphones, too soft for anyone but Caleb. "That was your last swing," I said. He didn't hear me. Or worse, he heard me and decided I didn't matter. He turned back to the ceremonial rope, lifted the golden blade overhead for the cameras, and brought it down with a theatrical chop. The rope snapped. The crowd erupted. Champagne sprayed. Investors cheered like they'd personally built the ship with their bare hands. Deep beneath us, the ship's systems woke. The Sovereign groaned to life like a giant exhaling. And in that roar of engines and applause, nobody noticed the fuse had already been lit. If you've ever been treated like you're invisible while doing all the heavy lifting, subscribe right now, because what I'm about to do to the Sterling Empire isn't revenge. It's a controlled demolition, and you're going to want to watch every piece fall. The celebration lasted 90 seconds. That's how long arrogance can float before reality drags it under. As the S Sovereign began to slide into the water, a sound tore through the shipyard metal, screaming like it was alive. Inside the ship, lights flickered, then turned a deep warning red, like emergency flares trapped behind glass. A heavy mechanical clunk echoed from the hull. The stabilizers retracted, and the ship began to tilt. At first it was subtle, a lean you could pretend wasn't happening if your suit was expensive enough. Then it tipped harder. The waterline rose unevenly. A panic wave swept the pier, fast and ugly. Arthur Sterling's voice cut through the chaos. "Caleb!" he screamed. "What did you do?" Caleb's face drained. I just cut the rope. The system was supposed to be automatic." An engineer sprinted onto the platform, nearly tripping over the velvet ropes. "Sir," he shouted, "the AI core rejected the ignition command. It entered an encrypted integrity lockdown." Arthur grabbed the engineer's collar. "Fix it, now." The engineer swallowed hard. "We've lost steering. We've lost ballast control. And the sensors are reporting a catastrophic software mismatch. The ship thinks," he hesitated, like the words were insane. "The ship thinks it's being lied to." The ship stopped, half submerged, leaning toward the pier like it wanted to crush the ceremony and everyone in it. Millions of dollars were burning every second. Investors were already pulling out phones not to film, but to call lawyers. Arthur's eyes scanned the platform like a man searching for an escape hatch. "Where is the lead programmer?" he demanded. The engineer turned slowly, reluctantly, and pointed at me. "She's right there, sir," he said. "Elena Vance is the only person with the level 5 biometric override." Arthur turned to me with a face he saved for negotiations, paternal, soft, fake. "Elena, dear," he said smoothly. "My son, he's impulsive. You know how he is. Please, get on the console, save the ship. We can talk about a bonus, a massive one." I looked down at my handkerchief. My blood made a neat circle on white silk. Then I looked up at him. "It's not about money, Arthur." His smile twitched. "Then what is it about?" "You hired me as a translator," I said. Arthur blinked. "And so I've decided," I continued, "to stop translating your commands to the ship's operating system." His expression tightened. "What are you talking about?" "The AI core only speaks one language," I said. "Truth. And right now, Sterling Maritime's records don't match the ship's reality." Arthur's jaw clenched. "Elena, this is not the time for—" I turned and walked away from the pier. Behind me, Caleb's voice cracked with rage. "You're fired!" he screamed. "You'll never work in this industry again. You're a thief." I didn't stop walking. I didn't even turn fully. "I'm not a thief, Caleb," I said over my shoulder. "I'm the landlord. A beat. And your rent is past due." The wind carried my words out over the water as the S Sovereign leaned like a dying god. And that's when I knew the loud men were finally about to learn what silence really sounds like. 1 hour later, Sterling Maritime's boardroom smelled like fear trying to hide under expensive cologne. Arthur sat at the head of the table, jaw clenched so hard his cheek muscles twitched. Caleb paced like a caged animal. Sarah Jenkins, their general counsel, stabbed at her tablet like she wanted to rip answers out of it. A speakerphone sat in the middle of the table like a bomb. On the other end was Global Heritage Bank Sterling Maritime's lifeline. A banker's voice came through clean and cold. "Arthur," the banker said, "the footage of your son swinging an axe at a staff member is already on Twitter." Arthur's knuckles whitened. "It has 4 million views," the banker continued. "Our social governance clause is crystal clear. We cannot fund a company led by a liability." A pause. "We are freezing the $2.9 billion credit line effective immediately." Caleb stopped pacing. "What? No." Arthur slammed his fist on the table. "It was a joke. A skit." "Elena will testify to that." The banker didn't respond. "Because bankers don't argue with fire. They step away and watch it burn." Arthur snapped at Sarah. "Call her! Get her in here! Now!" Sarah opened her mouth, and the boardroom doors opened. I walked in. No clipboard. No polite smile. Just me. And a red USB drive held between my fingers. The room went silent in a way that felt physical, like the air thickened and refused to move. I walked straight to the head of the table. Not to the assistant chair. To Arthur's chair. And I sat down. Caleb exploded. Get out of that chair. I didn't look at him. I looked at Sarah. Tell him, I said. Sarah's throat bobbed. She stared at her tablet, trembling. I just received updated filings, she whispered. Arthur's eyes narrowed. From where? The SEC system, the cap table, the patent holdings, everything. She looked up, stunned. Arthur. We thought Vanguard Technology was a subsidiary of the Sterling Group. Arthur's voice was sharp. It is. We bought them 3 years ago. Sarah shook her head slowly. No, we bought their patents. She turned her tablet so the room could see. But the holding company that owns the software licenses for every ship in our fleet is owned by a private entity called Alethea Holdings. Arthur's eyes flicked to me. I smiled. And I am the sole director of Alethea, I said. Silence dropped like a guillotine. Arthur's voice came out thin. That's impossible. I held up the red USB drive. You didn't hire a translator, Arthur, I said calmly. You hired someone who listened while you destroyed people. Caleb stepped forward, furious. You're lying. I'm documenting, I corrected. I plugged the USB drive into the boardroom computer. The screen lit up with folders, thousands of documents, audio files, time-stamped communications, contracts, photographs. A decade of rot turned into evidence. I didn't just translate the words, I said. I archived the truth. Caleb lunged toward me, but the doors opened again. 2 men in dark suits stepped in. Not Sterling Security. Federal Marshals. Nobody move, one of them said. Caleb froze mid-step. Arthur's face went gray, and the Sterling Empire, built on noise and intimidation, suddenly had to face a different kind of power. The quiet kind. If you're enjoying this masterclass in revenge, drop a fight in the comments. It pushes this story to more people who've been stepped on by loud, arrogant men and need to see what happens when the quiet one finally moves. Arthur Sterling did what predators do when the cage door closes. He tried to buy his way out. Fine, he said, forcing a smile that looked like pain. You have us. You want a payout? 10 million? 50? Name your price, Elena. Take the money and disappear. We can settle this quietly. I smiled back. You still think this is about a paycheck, I said. Then I leaned forward. Arthur, do you remember the name Captain Marcus Vance? Arthur froze. Not the dramatic kind of freeze. The real kind. The kind where the blood drains from the face because the past just stood up in the room. Caleb frowned. Who the hell is that? I didn't even look at him. 20 years ago, I said. A research vessel called the North Star vanished in the Atlantic. Arthur swallowed. The official report blamed weather, I continued. But you and I both know what happened. Arthur's voice was a whisper. Accidents happen in this business. That wasn't an accident, I said. I clicked a file on the screen. A folder opened. North Star, internal comms. You used early sonar tech to jam navigation, I said. The vessel collided with a Sterling freighter. You claimed the insurance. Caleb laughed nervously. That's insane. And you stole the prototype AI they were transporting. I finished. Caleb's laugh died. Because Arthur wasn't denying it. Marcus Vance was my father. He died in freezing water, I said. Because your family wanted to save pennies on a patent. My fingers touched the scar on my cheek. I spent 20 years becoming the person who could dismantle you from the inside. Caleb's voice shook. You can't prove any of that. It's ancient history. I looked at him, almost kindly. I don't have to prove the shipwreck, Caleb, I said. I only had to wait for you to swing that axe. Sarah's eyes snapped to me. What? I pulled up a contract clause on the screen. Yellow highlight, a single paragraph. The conduct integrity clause in your merger with Global Heritage Bank, I said, was written by me. Arthur's eyes widened. No. Yes, I said. I inserted one line. I read it aloud, slow and clear. Any documented act of physical violence or gross ethical misconduct by a senior executive in a public forum triggers an immediate transfer of voting rights to the primary technology provider. Sarah's face turned pale. Oh my God, she whispered. She turned to Caleb, voice breaking. Caleb, you gave her the company when you swung that axe. Caleb's hands trembled. That can't. It is, I said. By swinging that golden axe at me on a live-streamed event, you triggered a moral turpitude event. I continued. I tapped the cap table on the screen. Alethea Holdings, my company, now holds 51% of the voting power of Sterling Maritime. Arthur's body sagged, like gravity finally remembered him. Caleb whispered, hollow. So, I... I did this. Yes, I said softly. Then I reached for the golden axe lying on the table. It gleamed like it still wanted respect. I scraped the blade against the mahogany edge. Gold flakes fell like dead glitter. Underneath was dull gray. Cheap lead. I held it up so they could see. You thought this was gold, I said. I looked at Caleb. Just like your family. A thin layer of shine over a core of worthless metal. That was the second twist. Not just revenge. Not just exposure. Transfer of power. Tuttle. The marshals stepped forward. Arthur Sterling, the lead marshal said. Caleb Sterling, you are under arrest for racketeering, securities fraud, and obstruction of justice. Arthur tried to stand tall in handcuffs, like dignity could block consequences. This isn't over, he hissed at me. I'll tie you up in court for decades. I didn't blink. You don't have decades, Arthur, I said. I tapped my laptop. You don't even have a bank account. His eyes twitched. I froze the corporate assets 10 minutes ago, I continued. Your lawyers won't even get their retainer. Sarah stared at me like she was seeing a ghost. What now? She asked, voice shaking. The ship. The ship is still sinking at the pier. I finally let myself exhale. No, I said. The ship is fine. Sarah blinked. What? I deactivated the stabilizers, I said calmly, to give the cameras something dramatic to look at. I typed quickly. On a screen in the corner, live footage showed the S. Sovereign correcting itself, ballast systems realigning, stabilizers extending, the hull leveling out like a beast regaining its balance. There, I said. The ship will float, Sarah swallowed. Under the Sterling name? I looked out at the harbor. No, I said. It will float under a new name. Sarah's voice was barely audible. Which is? I answered without hesitation. The Marcus Vance. A week later, the world had moved on. It always does. But the industry hadn't. Sterling Maritime's name was gone from the building's glass facade, replaced by one word in clean black letters. Enfance. I stood on the top floor balcony, looking out over the ocean. Wind tugged at my hair where the blade had cut it. The scar on my cheek was fading, but it would never disappear completely. A junior analyst stepped onto the balcony, nervous, clutching papers. Miss Vance? She asked. I didn't turn. The board is waiting for your signature on the new safety regulations, she said. They're worried about the cost. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make it uncomfortable. Then I spoke. Tell them the cost of a life is the only number that isn't negotiable. The analyst nodded quickly. Then she hesitated. And how did you do it? She asked. How did you stay calm when he swung that axe at you? I touched the scar. Because I knew exactly how much that swing was going to cost him, I said. It's easy to stay calm, I added, when you've already won the game before it started. She left like she'd just heard a secret she didn't deserve. I turned back to the ocean, and for the first time in 20 years, I felt the tide going the direction I chose. I looked directly into the camera now, not as an employee, not as an assistant, as the person who had been listening the entire time. People ask me if I feel guilty about destroying a legacy, I said. I tell them I didn't destroy anything. I just let the light in. A legacy built on a lie is just a sandcastle waiting for the tide. I took the red USB drive and held it for a moment, feeling the weight of it, not the plastic, but what it contained. Then I dropped it into the ocean. It fell, spinning, catching light once, then vanished. Never mistake a person's silence for a lack of a plan, I said. The most dangerous person in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one listening to everything you say and calculating the exact moment to use it against you. If you want more stories where arrogance gets crushed by intelligence, hit like, subscribe. Stay quiet, stay focused, and keep your own red USB ready.